Fog this morning, partial sunshine late today.
Good morning, America. I'm Charles Gibson.
And I'm Nancy Snyderman, sitting in today for Joan London. Coming up in our first hour this Wednesday, January 29th, the President's State of the Union address. Tax cuts and a peace dividend. Are they a remedy for the economy?
Adding up your portion of the growing national debt, how much do you pay?
And a review of a fanciful new film called Hear My Song. Bill Evans?
Good morning. Well, you know, up to 10 inches of rain has fallen over this past week in parts of Washington state, causing rivers to begin to flood. And with no end in sight, the rain and scenes like this will only get worse. Charlie, Nancy?
All right, thanks very much, Bill Evans. Spencer Christian, still under the weather? I'm not feeling very well?
I feel good.
Well, I know you do. Thank goodness, because we'd have an empty chair if you didn't. Joan's on vacation. Nancy Snyderman in for her. I think we all sort of gathered together last night. The Congress, the top officials of the government, gathered in the House chamber, and Americans gathered around their television set last night for the President's State of the Union address. Obviously a very critical time, especially at the beginning of this election year. The speech last night was designed to answer voters' questions about the President's plans for America's future. But the question is, did the speech work? Did it accomplish what the President needed? Well, we're going to be talking to the White House Chief of Staff this morning as he offers his view. Also, on two key topics from the speech, the economy and education, we'll have two leading observers of those fields present their reactions to the speech.
Also, our resident geography, Harm DeBlay, will be here with us. He has a lesson for us on how maps can lie. But leading the news at this hour, more on the President's prescription for the nation. Mike Schneider has that story and all the other news of the day. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Nancy. Good morning, everyone. The President is out with that long-awaited prescription, and the key ingredient here in his State of the Union address turns out to be a fairly modest package of tax breaks. Among other things, the President wants Congress to approve a $500 million or $500 increase in personal tax exemption for each child, a health insurance tax credit of almost $4,000 for families who qualify, a reduction in payroll tax withholding, a credit of $5,000 for first-time home buyers. On the defense side of the ledger, Mr. Bush said only 20 of those B-2 bombers would be built, not the 70 stealth bombers as originally planned. He also wants to cancel small ICBM programs and cancel production of new warheads for sea-based nuclear missiles. Also cancel the Peacekeeper nuclear missile. Mr. Bush did get one big stir out of Congress last night when he mentioned his economic plan and politics.
I know, and you know, that my plan is unveiled in a political season. And I know, and you know, that everything I propose will be viewed by some in merely partisan terms, but I ask you to know what is in my heart, and my aim is to increase our nation's good. And I'm doing what I think is right, and I'm proposing what I know will help.
No big secret that most presidential speeches draw fire from the opposition. This is an election year, of course, and that makes it a little bit harsher, you might expect. Well, the State of the Union got a critical reception from congressional Democrats and from the challengers who would like to replace Mr. Bush in the White House.
This was the State of the Union which had been trumpeted as the defining moment of this president's administration. And instead what we got was highfalutin rhetoric, Band-Aids where major surgery is needed, and no real hope for the American people.
He said taxes are too high, spending is too high, regulations are too heavy. It sort of makes you wonder who's been in charge the last 3 years. And so I think if Mr. Bush wants to join us in running against that record, he is welcome to do so.
ABC's political director, Hal Bruno, live for us right now in Washington for some post-speech analysis. Hal, good to have you back with us this morning.
Mike, nice to be with you.
A little bit too little, too late in terms of Mr. Bush. Is he likely to get the cooperation now that he probably could have gotten a while back?
It's going to be pretty tough, Mike. He said it himself. It's an election year. Some of this should have come last fall when they had a chance to jump on top of this recession problem. It was a good speech. It was well delivered. It couldn't possibly live up to the expectations that the White House and the President himself set out for it. But he's going to have some problems getting this through Congress.
Well, the question, Hal, is does he really need to get it through Congress in order to succeed politically? If he fails there, doesn't he have Congress to blame?
Yeah, that used to be a good fallback position, but not anymore. Both he and Congress have got to get something done this time. They're getting a pretty tough message from the American people. You know, for most of the last 24 years, we've had a bad situation in which you've had a president in the White House who believed he had a mandate, a Republican president, reaching too far, trying to get programs through Congress that had no hope of passage. On the other side, you had a Democratic Congress believing it had a mandate, reaching too far, passing legislation that they knew the president was going to veto and that they could not override. And the result is you've had a type of political and legislative stagnation. That's got to end now. The country is in a crisis situation. This recession is hurting a lot of people, and these people are making it known that they want some kind of an action. Some kind of compromise has to be made between the Republican in the White House and the Democrats in Congress.
Hal, we have to leave it there. Thanks, as always. ABC's political director, Hal Bruno, in Washington for us this morning. Earlier, you heard the president refer to the political season. Well, the New Hampshire primary is now less than 3 weeks away, and the president could have swayed some votes last night with what he said. The question is, how did the speech actually play in New Hampshire? Here's ABC's Mike Von Fremd.
But to do more,
many of the people in this room helped George Bush win the New Hampshire primary 4 years ago. But last night at this Chamber of Commerce dinner, the businessmen and women here who've fallen on tough financial times listened with a skeptical ear to what the president had to say.
We've landed hard, and he didn't address, I don't think he addressed the middle class. I don't think he addressed New Hampshire's real needs. It seemed like a campaign speech to me.
I think he probably helped himself in the eyes of the American people, but I think there was a lot of smoke and mirrors and voodoo economics and just things that people wanted to hear, as were said.
I think when you have 10 people writing speeches for you and your career is falling down, I think that you can say all kinds of wonderful things. I want to see some action.
But Amy Ekman, who is co-owner of a construction company, watched as the president proposed steps to jumpstart the housing industry and was impressed.
He wants to get the results within 2 months from now, and if he can do that, then it will certainly help him politically.
And the state Republican Party treasurer that warned the White House about raising expectations too high felt the president pulled it off.
I think he came as close as he could have, given the fact that he's got a separated Congress. I thought it was as close to a home run as a president could ever hit in the State of the Union, especially with the stakes on the table so high.
The stakes are so high here because many of the voters are still so angry, and the president's running out of time to turn things around. As you pointed out, Mike, they go to the polls here in less than 3 weeks.
Mike, how typical, though, is the state of New Hampshire in terms of what's happening there, politically speaking? Is this an aberration, or is this state hurting a lot more than, say, some of the other states in terms of this recession?
Well, economically, it's hurting more than many of the other states. The foreclosure signs that you see all around are really so sad. But one thing that doesn't help is the union leader. It has not only endorsed Bush's opponent, Pat Buchanan, it practically worships him. And in the editorial section that I'm reading today, today's paper, somebody made a big speech yesterday, but it wasn't George Bush. It's all about Pat Buchanan's recovery program. That's what the voters here are reading this morning.
We'll see the power of the press perhaps in a few weeks. All right, Mike, thanks very much. ABC's Mike Von Fremd live for us this morning in New Hampshire. Finally, Bill Clinton may end up, after all, doing well in the state of New Hampshire, perhaps elsewhere, as far as we know, around the country. But country music legend Tammy Wynette sounds like she's ready for a fight right now with Mrs. Clinton. Why? You may remember the national TV interview just a few days ago where Mrs. Clinton went on the air to defend her husband against charges of adultery and say that she was no kind of Tammy Wynette kind of figure, no stand-by-your-man kind of woman. Well, as you might expect, Mrs. Tammy Wynette is not all that thrilled to hear that kind of talk right now, and she has essentially said that she wants an apology from Mrs. Clinton, or she says she's willing to go toe-to-toe with her. Politics can be a tough business. Nancy, Bill?
Well, Mike, I'd stand by you any day. I just want you to know that.
Oh, well, maybe we can have a song written about us, Nancy.
Or stand by your weatherman.
That's right, stand by your weatherman. Thanks a lot, Mike. It's 8 after the hour. Bill Evans in from WABC today, still standing in for Spencer.
I'm going to do both.
Are things still so wet down south?
Still wet down south and very wet in the northwest. Look at these pictures we have for you this morning. It is quite wet, particularly right here in the Snoqualmie Valley. Look at all this rain. It's mostly minor flooding in the farmlands and sections like that. But some of that could even get worse today. The reason why is because a lot of rain will still possibly pour in there once again today. Look at all these pictures. Lots of rain, lots of flooding along the Chehalis River. That is in Centralia, Washington. And more of that is possible today. Here's the reason why. There's a couple of low-pressure systems that are on the map this morning, and several of those will continue to flow in the jet stream. And the jet stream is just taking those and driving them right into the northwest. And sections of Washington and also Oregon and Northern California could get some rain. Of course, there's been a drought, but all the rain is still heading well inland to the northwest and not over central and southern California where it's needed most. And more of that rain will continue today. Well, it's going to be wet there, and it's going to be wet down south once again. And there's flooding down south, too. Along the Pearl River in Bogalusa, Louisiana, sections of the south will see some flooding in the low-lying areas there, too. And more rain along the Gulf Coast will continue as a low-pressure system there finally exits over Florida. But much of the country today is going to see gorgeous weather. Lots of sunshine in the northeast, but cold temperatures. 30s and 40s in the Great Lakes, 50s and 60s across much of the country today. Very mild weather for January. It's more like May. That's a look at the nation's weather forecast. Now, here's a look at the forecast where you are.
Another dreary morning in central Iowa. Good morning, everyone. I'm Channel 5 meteorologist Rick Mitchell. Yes, we're going to have to put up with clouds and fog again this morning, but sunshine, or at least partial sunshine, is possible this afternoon, a high in the 40s.
Coming up in my next weather report, using meteorology's most advanced technology. I'll show you all the clouds by satellite and the rain by radar. Charlie?
Thanks, Bill. As you just heard in the news, President Bush used his State of the Union address to announce defense cuts, tax cuts, and plans for improving health care and education. But the words he chose most carefully focused on his plan to revive the economy. One of the chief architects of that speech is Samuel Skinner, White House Chief of Staff. He is joining us from Washington this morning. Mr. Skinner, good morning. Good to have you with us.
Thank you, Charlie. Good to be with you.
An important speech for the president. He was due to set out his vision. Most of those proposals, hadn't we heard them before?
Well, a number of them were new, Charlie. Some of them, of course, had been proposals that the president had sent to the Congress over the last 2 years, and they failed to enact those proposals. So we took those proposals and added several new ones that really make sense and put it in an agenda that the Congress can understand, and he's asked for action by the 20th of March on our short-term agenda.
In terms of the economy, which will obviously be critical in this election year, what do you consider to be the most important single step announced last night?
Well, there's no one single step. The single most important step is the step that was taken by the Federal Reserve late last year when they lowered the discount rate. That's something the president had been asking them to do for some time, and when they did that, that really provided a stimulus into the economy. Having said that, the short-term agenda that the president put forth last night, the investment tax allowance, the new first-time home buyers credits, the changes in depreciation, the passive loss rules, and the revision of those, all will make a significant difference in the economy this year if we can get Congress to act.
But in terms of stimulus, will not the most important thing be the changes in the withholding rates, putting more money in people's pockets right away?
Yes, we do think that will have a big help. As you know, over the years, people have had more and more money withheld by the government from their paychecks, and they get that back a year later. In the meantime, they've really basically had an interest-free loan that they've made to the government. And we're correcting that. There'll still be, most of the people involved will still get money back, but they'll have an option to use that money this year rather than wait till next year to get it back on April 15th.
In terms of the short-term program, though, Mr. Skinner, how's the government going to pay for it? As I understand, if those new withholding tables go into effect, that's going to require the government to borrow about $25 billion more in the short term. If the tax changes that the president suggested are enacted by the Congress, that's going to cost a good bit more in terms of billions. How do you pay for it?
Well, this morning, Director Darman will be unveiling his budget, and I might add this program is paid for within the budget discipline that the president signed 2 years ago. And that's why he can say, I'm stopping spending, I'm putting a cap on spending. All of that is very important, and that budget discipline is what we're going to keep within. And Dick Darman will talk about that this afternoon.
You mentioned the deadline of March 20th that the president said to the Congress, enact my program by then or the battle will be joined. Where do you expect the big fight? Where is the president going to draw the line? And is he going to use this as a way to run against Congress in this election year?
Well, they got to move forward quickly. And, you know, they've indicated they can move pretty quickly when they want to. I was involved last year in working with the Congress when we ended the rail strike in 17 hours with legislation. And this legislation is not that complicated. It'll be up to the Hill very shortly, and it's all drafted, and they can move very quickly. So if they can solve a rail strike in a day, they can clearly get this legislation to the president by the 20th of March.
Where's the line drawn, though? Is the big fight going to come on the capital gains tax again?
Well, I hope it won't draw any lines. This is not the time for drawing lines in the sand. This is the time to help the American people and get this economy back rolling again. And now Congress has an opportunity to deal with a problem of perception that they have. And that problem of perception is they don't move quick enough, and when they do, they don't move responsibly. They now have the opportunity The glass is really half full to show the American people how responsible they can be. And we're very optimistic they'll rise to the occasion, Charlie.
Samuel Skinner, good to see you. Hope we see you again soon.
All right, thank you, Charlie.
Thank you for being with us. When we come back, authorities on education, health, and the economy with their take on the president's speech. We'll be right back.
The greatest events of our lives are celebrated once each year. Birthdays, anniversaries, and holidays. We share with our family, friends, and neighbors. The annual fundraising campaign for Catholic Charities is a time for sharing as well. Throughout each year, your cash gifts help pay for counseling, crisis pregnancy services, support groups, and family life education. Catholic Charities serves anyone in need. Last year, we served over 25,000 people, and the need is growing. Please donate through your church envelope or send your contribution to Catholic Charities.
Save now on indoor home improvement ideas from Menards. Brighten your home with energy-saving fluorescent lights from U.S. Fluorescent. Choose from many styles. This 48-inch wraparound light is now just $19.99. And save on new Glidden Spread Solo latex flat paint. It's Glidden's best hiding wall paint. White or antique white is now just $5.88 a gallon. Discover the home improvement possibilities at Menards.
Save big money at Menards.
The Iowa Lottery's heated things up. Iowa's $100,000 cash game has emerged. The daily game with a daily chance for you to win up to $100,000 at once. Win by matching 2, 3, 4, or all 5 numbers drawn in any order from a total of 35. It's green early this year with Iowa's $100,000 cash game. Play the Iowa Lottery. It's a brand new season.
The morning the crime happened, he said he was there. But a different man was arrested and convicted and stands to spend the rest of his days in jail. Now, following a year-long Channel 5 News investigation, you'll finally hear his side of the story.
This is an American hero.
Me? No. I'm a teacher.
To the kids they reach, teachers are heroes. Call 1-800-45-TEACH. Be a hero.
University. Joel Siegel reviews a fanciful romance called Hear My Song in our next half hour.
17 minutes after the hour, and now a closer look at some of the specifics in the President's State of the Union address, and our focus really 3 topics: the economy, defense, and education. Jonathan Kozol, who has written extensively on the failures of the education system in this country, is here with me in New York. And joining us from Washington, Jim Fallows, Washington editor of The Atlantic, who frequently writes on matters of the economy and defense. And since he focused on those 2 issues primarily, Jim Fallows, let me start with you. What struck you most about the President's speech?
Well, on the defense front, I think that the President did something successful. I speak here as somebody who once labored as a presidential speechwriter. I know these speeches are very difficult to do, and I think in the first half, he struck a successful tone in saying, look, we did do something historic in the last year, and we should pay attention to it and move on from there. On the economic part of the speech, I think he faced a real dilemma, and the dilemma is everybody agrees there are real long-term changes that need to be made to the economy to make it fit again. But in the short term, the President wants to get the economy stimulated and have people not feel so morose. And there's a real conflict between how you solve those 2 problems. And I think he had a difficult time resolving that conflict.
Well, it is also a problem for him in that his political future depends on the short term. And I was interested talking to Samuel Skinner a few moments ago, said, what's the most important single thing? And he said the most important single thing's already been done. The Federal Reserve lowered the interest rates. There is a feeling in this administration that the economy will rise on its own tide and that what they do may indeed not have much effect. But he's taken some significant short-term steps, specifically putting more money in people's pockets by changing the withholding rates.
Well, it's true, but this withholding point does illustrate the short-term, long-term contrast. In the next 3 or 4 months, if this goes through, people will have, on average, a couple of $100 more to spend. But this is money they're going to have to give back in extra taxes next April, so it is the epitome of giving a short-term boost. The point about waiting for things to turn around, again, illustrates a challenge the president has to work with, because he does need for his own fortunes to have things look better a few months from now. But almost all economists say that making the economy productive in the long run, getting higher value industries, competing more successfully with Japan or Germany, is not a matter of waiting for things to turn up, but of actually doing something active in education and in technology.
So did you see as many changes, real changes, in his long-term strategy as in his short-term?
It was very difficult to detect any long-term changes in his strategy. Again, in the military area, I think he did do some constructive and interesting long-term things. But in economics, it was more a matter of short-term kind of cattle prodding of the economy to hope people will spend more in the next few months, but very little long-term change.
I don't mean to give short shrift to the defense question, because it is interesting. All of us grew up, as the president pointed out last night, with air raid warnings, hiding under the school desks, talking about bomb shelters, etc. There has been such an amazing change in the last year, and we're all focused on the situation of the economy, but he obviously, and generally, there ought to be long-term points for the changes in the world.
It's true, and there was one other very interesting thing he said on this front. He said the most important event in his life had happened in the last year with the collapse of communism. I would have thought that most people of his generation would have said winning World War II was the most important event of their lives, but we'll see how he explains that in the next while.
Jonathan Kozol, your reaction to what he said about education?
Well, he didn't say much, frankly. He gave it about 1 minute, to be exact. No new money, no new plans. A bit of rhetoric, but it sounded rather weary and rather retrospective.
Well, there is some new money for Head Start, is there not?
Well, I was going to get to that. He spoke briefly of Head Start. He's adding a bit of money, $600 million. Still, 2/3 of the eligible kids will be excluded. I don't know. A year ago, he was the education president. This year, I guess he's the economics president. There's a kind of almost intellectual promiscuity about it, a jumpy quality. A year ago, he was almost manic in his effusiveness about education. This year, virtually nothing. I was disappointed.
Well, people are very focused on the economy, and I suspect it's natural that he talks more about that. But he comes back to his idea that you have to do something fundamentally to change the public school system in this country. And his feeling is that you want to develop new schools. And I think he's coming back to this idea of using vouchers, is he not? Choice as to where you send your children to school, hoping that that will develop new schools to compete with the present public schools.
But none of this is new, Charlie. We've been hearing this for years now. I mean, most of this, actually, we've heard since 1983, so this is a decade old. I was looking and hoping for some type of sweeping new initiative, and when he spoke of Head Start, I got excited because I thought, this is his chance. Maybe on this one chunk of the problem, he'll make a really sweeping departure, and he could have done it at low cost. I thought he'd do something like this. He'd say, look, I've been promising Head Start for years and years. Here it is, $5 billion, no fooling, every eligible kid will get it, a peace dividend for the poor children in this country. That wouldn't have dealt with all the other issues we've discussed, but it would have been a good symbolic departure. He missed that chance.
Is education a major issue, do you think, in this campaign?
It will be, because the Democrats are going to force it onto the agenda, but he missed the chance to take the lead, I'm afraid.
Jonathan Kozol and Jim Fallows, thank you both for being with us.
Reichardt's annual winter sale is now in progress. Savings at 25 to 50% on quality clothing for both men and women. Reichardt's never buys off-price merchandise just for sales, as many stores do. This is our regular in-stock fall merchandise, including our famous Southwick natural-shouldered suits and sport coats. Also on sale in our men's department are sport shirts, dress shirts, sweaters, jackets, slacks, and top coats. We have a special rack of sport coats that were as high as $295, now $75. In our women's store, we still have a large selection of sweaters and blouses, skirts, slacks, with savings of 50%. Alterations are free, even on sale merchandise. Now is a wonderful opportunity to add quality and long-life styling to your wardrobe at a great savings. Please come and see us. We have courteous and competent personnel here. No sale is ever final here. And I'll see that you're completely satisfied when you shop here, because I'm here. I'm Bill Reichert, and I own the store.
Statistics show that 46% of all kids who smoke marijuana are inner city youth. Guess who the other 54% are?
For health reasons, Americans are eating more and more fish these days. But a 6-month investigation by Consumer Reports has found that a lot of the fish sold today is barely fit to eat. This week, we'll tell you about some of the problems Consumer Reports uncovered, including false freshness claims, misleading package labels, and fish contaminated by toxic chemicals. If this high-protein, low-fat food is a part of your diet, you won't want to miss this special investigation. This week at 5, only on Channel 5 News.
This is a Channel 5 News Update.
This Channel 5 News Brief is brought to you by Divine Office Systems, your authorized Lexmark laser printer dealer.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us. I'm Rod Fowler, 7:25 now. Much of the talk around the breakfast table this morning probably centers around President Bush's State of the Union address. He made it last night on national television. As you might imagine, Iowa Senator Charles Grassley, a fellow Republican, had a glowing review of the president's proposal, whereas presidential candidate Tom Harkin says he was not really impressed.
He has a very good tax program, one that's going to give the economy a shot in the arm, stimulate investment, stimulate consumer spending, have tax reform for middle-class, tax-paying Americans. And as a member of the Senate Finance Committee, I'm in a position to help him get this program through, and I'm going to do that. I think it's very good for Iowa, very good for the nation, and particularly good for the family.
We remember what you said a few weeks ago on the David Frost Show, when you said, "I will do whatever is necessary to get reelected." Well, it's obvious, Mr. President, you will also say whatever is necessary to get reelected. But fooled once, Mr. President, your fault. Fooled twice, our fault. And we don't intend to be fooled again this year.
Of course, what's probably more important is what you think, the voter, the American. Last night, we talked to some of the members of the Iowa Citizens Budget Campaign. It's a watchdog group that pushes spending cuts and better public services.
A positive, I guess, thing that he did say, since I am a realtor, is the $5,000 tax credit for the first-time home buyer and the passive loss being implemented again.
I thought it was full of real contradictions. He said that we wanted to increase America's capability in education, yet we're cutting the amount of money we grant to students who are going to college.
He said, well, as I'm leader of the free world, I'm also leader of America. Well, to me, he's not the leader of the free world, and he's not leading our country into any kind of stability or growth.
His proposals seem to benefit the rich and the rest of us Puritans, as he says, to heck with us.
And I also don't think he's realistic about the state that our country is in. We are continually deteriorating, and I don't believe that he sees it.
All kinds of reaction this morning. One more bit of local news here. We'll know later today where the state's budget acts will hit Iowa State University's extension service. A report will be released today recommending what areas should see layoffs. Officials say the report does not call for closing or consolidating any county offices. Well, Dave Rexroth is in for Rick here on the cut-in, and he tells us fog is getting dense in some areas.
Yeah, some patchy areas are starting to become dense. I'll tell you when it's going to dissipate right after this.
The IBM Laser Printer 10